Welcome everybody. This is the last session of this term's webinars on the future of the island of Ireland. It's been a busy term, and this is a great way to bring it to completion. As Christmas now looms closer and closer, we have a very interesting evening ahead of us. But before Barry introduces the speakers, let me thank Sidney Sussex College and the Centre for Geopolitics for sponsoring this series of webinars, which I think have been incredibly successful, and we trust will continue to be so next term and next year. Barry, would you like to make the formal introductions now?
Thanks very much, Eugenio. I'll be as brief as I can because, as always, we're against the clock and we have a great speaker tonight. As always, our speaker is going to speak for up to 10 minutes. Then there's going to be a conversation for about 25 minutes and then questions and answers for about 25 minutes as well. Our speaker tonight is Doug Beattie MLA. Doug is the leader of the Ulster Unionist Party. He was elected to the Northern Ireland Assembly in 2016 for the Upper Bann Constituency after serving 2 years as a local councillor in Armagh Down. Prior to entering politics, Doug served with the Royal Irish Rangers and subsequently the Royal Irish Regiment for 27 years before joining the Army Reserves, where he has served for 12 years, rising to the rank of Major. Doug saw service in Northern Ireland, Bosnia, Kosovo, Iraq and Afghanistan, receiving the Queen's Commendation for Bravery and the Military Cross. As an Ulster Unionist councillor, Doug was the Armed Forces champion for Armagh, Banbridge and Craigavon Borough Council. And when he became an MLA, he took up the Justice portfolio, which he still holds. A one-time keen rugby player, Doug remains an active supporter of both Ulster and Irish rugby. Doug will be in conversation with Richard Burke, Professor of the History of Political Thought at King's College, University of Cambridge. Richard completed his PhD at the University of Cambridge and a second BA in Classics at Birkbeck College, University of London. Like myself, Richard took his first degree at University College Dublin. Among his many accolades, Richard was joint winner of the Istvan Hunt Memorial Book Prize in Intellectual History in 2016 and has held fellowships across Europe and the United States. Doug will also take questions from my colleague Niamh Gallagher, Associate Professor in Modern British and Irish History and a Fellow at St Catherine's College at the University of Cambridge. Niamh is author of Ireland and the Great War, A Social and Political History, Bloomsbury 2020, which won the Royal Historical Society's Whitfield Prize, and I'm delighted is now a co-convener of our series. I should note that Niamh is also co-editor of the forthcoming Political Thought of the Irish Revolution, along with the aforementioned Professor Richard Burke. Without further ado, and after those lengthy introductions, I'm delighted to hand the floor to Doug. Doug, you have up to 10 minutes. Thanks again for being with us.
Barry, thank you, and thank you all, and for all those who are watching and listening in. It's a genuine pleasure to be here and be able to chat to you all. I look forward to some of the questions, which I'm sure will be challenging. Let me just set the scene here first of all, so you know what you're looking at. I'm an Irishman. I am proudly an Irishman. I have always been an Irishman. The very fact, though, that I am a unionist, that I believe that Northern Ireland is better off as part of the United Kingdom, is what defines my politics. But culturally, I remain Irish. Northern Ireland is a fantastic place. It's gone through a lot, but it's very resilient. Its people are passionate. Its people are uncompromising. Its people know their own mind. I think it's an extraordinary place to live, and it's an extraordinary place to be part of the United Kingdom, and it's an extraordinary place to be close to our nearest neighbour in Ireland. And there's an awful lot that we have in common, of course. Many people sort of say to me, Doug, as an Irishman, why do you want to be part of the United Kingdom? Well, I've been very lucky that I've lived in all the different constituent parts of the United Kingdom, in England, Scotland and Wales. And when living in Scotland, I felt uniquely Irish, but I also felt at home. Likewise, living in England, I felt uniquely Irish, but I also felt at home, and the same in Wales, uniquely Irish, but I also felt at home. So I felt this strong sense of belonging to the United Kingdom, and that's what makes my unionism incredibly strong. But don't think that doesn't make me a European, because I'm as much a European as well. And for interest's sake, I voted against Brexit. I thought Brexit would be destabilizing. We foretold it as being destabilizing, and hence it's come to pass. Where do I see the vision of Northern Ireland? Well, the first thing I have to say is Northern Ireland doesn't have any minorities anymore. It doesn't matter if you're a unionist or a loyalist, a Republican or a nationalist or none of those. There is no majorities there. We're all together in the melting pot of people. And I genuinely believe, clearly in the geographic space, which is called Northern Ireland, but more so in the people who occupy that geographical space. Some people will hear me use a term, a union of people. It's not a catchphrase, it's a vision. It's a vision for people working together, regardless of their religion, regardless of their sexual orientation, regardless of their culture, their upbringing, middle class, lower class, upper class, regardless of their color of their skin, people who can work together. And I genuinely believe that is what we can do in regards to Northern Ireland, is make us all work together. And people will focus an awful lot on some of the negatives of Northern Ireland. And they will say, well, we are divided. And yes, we have division, and we could focus on that if you want. But take yourself to Bosnia and you'll really see what division is all about. So we have a problem with a divided society, but it's a fixable problem with a divided society. And likewise, people say we have violence, or we've had violence on our streets. And yes, of course we have. I had an uncle, Samuel, who was murdered by terrorists. And I still remember at the age of 10, my mother falling to her knees screaming when she was told her younger brother had been murdered. But when we talk about violence, if you want to see violence, take yourself to Afghanistan, and I have done. And I know what violence is all about. So we have a problem, but we'll deal with that. And we can say the same in regards to poverty. We have poverty here and deprivation here in Northern Ireland, but not on the scale that you'll see in Africa. So we have to take things in perspective. And instead of focusing on the negatives of Northern Ireland, we need to focus on the positives of Northern Ireland. And I am an extremely confident, positive unionist who believes in inclusion and looking to the future. But of course, there are major problems and questions that we have to ask. And I know that there are people who have an aspiration in Northern Ireland for a united Ireland. And that's a fair aspiration. And I have no issue with them having a fair aspiration in the same way that I believe in a United Kingdom. And that's a fair aspiration for me. So identity politics really is an issue that we have to deal with at some stage or another. But for me, what's really important to make Northern Ireland work, and it's important to nationalists to make Northern Ireland work, I have to say, as it is for a unionist, and that is focusing on our economy, because a strong, good economy will mean that we have a strong, healthy health service. A strong economy means we'll have a good education system. And I believe our education should see all of our children educated together, regardless of their religion, going from the playground together to the classroom together, and then to the workplace together, and have a virtual injection against sectarianism by being educated in the same classroom. But a strong economy will also create good housing, social housing, affordable housing, and a good economy will make sure that we have good jobs, and good jobs for our young people, which gives them an opportunity so they don't have to leave the shores of Northern Ireland to find that opportunity. But of course some will, but we still need that opportunity to bring them back to Northern Ireland again. But good jobs, that means our young people get up in the morning with a sense of purpose, and they go to bed at night with a sense of fulfillment. And it's that prosperity and well-being agenda, I think, is what will really make Northern Ireland a better place for everybody. And that doesn't stop us having these difficult questions about the identity, or difficult questions about the constitutional question, or difficult questions about Brexit, and certainly not difficult questions that we have about the protocol. And we need to deal with all of those. But the future of Northern Ireland lies with its people, and its people working together is what will make Northern Ireland work, and make Northern Ireland economy work, and what really take us beyond these difficulties that we have now. Where do I see Northern Ireland's future? Well, listen, it's not just rhetoric for me to say we're 100 years old and it's been a difficult 100 years. We haven't had much of a break without something getting in the way of that 100 years. But it's not rhetoric for me to say that I can see us carrying on for an awful long time as part of the United Kingdom, if not always. So I can still see us being part of the United Kingdom 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now. Because the interesting thing is about Northern Ireland at this moment in time, whether you are class yourself as British or whether you class yourself as Irish, there is a middle ground of younger people who are growing up who identify as Northern Irish. That doesn't mean that they are Northern Irish British. It doesn't mean that they are Northern Irish Irish. It means they are Northern Irish with a very distinct identity for themselves, who see Northern Ireland as their home and want to make it a place for everybody. And we have to acknowledge that demographic which is coming up. And it's important that we set the conditions for it. The Belfast Good Friday Agreement is what we use for governance here. It is that fine balance that we all need. But 21, 23 years on, it needs an MOT, because a five-party coalition now envisaged in the Belfast Good Friday Agreement no longer produces good government. So we have to look at that, and we have to see how we can fix this now to it creates good government. And that's not for me to say here, this is what I would do. This would need to be a discussion with all of the parties, because power sharing is really important, whether that's a power sharing government and a power sharing opposition, which could be one model, or any other model. But it's really important that we look at the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, we maintain its balance, which is really important, and we make sure that we can future-proof it, because it's not future-proofed and we are not producing good outcomes as it stands now. So Northern Ireland has got an awful lot of work to do to ensure its future. That work is about focusing on its economy and dealing with the difficult questions that we have to deal with. It's about looking at Westminster and saying some of the things you are doing does not suit us, so let us make some of those decisions for ourselves. And it's about creating good relationships, not just good relationships within the United Kingdom, with England, Scotland and Wales, but good relationships with our nearest neighbour outside the United Kingdom, which is Ireland, and certainly good relationships within Europe, within the EU. And as I've seen over this last week, good relationships in the United States, who certainly want to hear the message about a confident Northern Ireland and a confident unionism, who wants to share power in order to make it better. So that's kind of my pitch as I see things as the leader of the Ulster Unionist Party. And I hope that wasn't too rambling and made a fair degree of sense, even if people don't necessarily agree with my vision.
Great, Doug. Thanks. And at least plenty of time for conversation. So without further ado, over to you, Richard.
Okay, Doug. Well, thanks very much for those very interesting words. And it's great to have this conversation with you. Clearly a new and distinct voice within unionism, and someone trying to advance a constructive agenda, which is therefore very interesting to engage with. I'd like to begin with the sort of general question about the party which you lead, the Ulster Unionist Party, which of course has a long history. I don't ask about the whole history. I just want to ask a specific post-1998, post-Belfast Agreement question, which may seem like a sort of provocative question, but nonetheless, I think you'll get the point. The question is, what do you think has caused the decline in the fortunes of the Ulster Unionist Party since Trimble?
Well, I think the first thing is there's a number of things, Richard, and it would be really hard just to put my finger on it and say, well, there's a reason why. But people need to remember that the Ulster Unionist Party put itself out there. It made the difficult decisions to agree the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, to share power with nationalists, and indeed then with Republicans. It led to some really difficult decisions, including letting mass murderers out of prison. All of these difficult decisions went against the grain for an awful lot of people who came from a unionist or loyalist background. So we took the backlash from that, because many unionists and loyalists did not vote for the agreement. So of course we took the backlash, The DUP, which is the largest party now, exploited that backlash. They were a party of protest, and they were still a party of protest, and they continued to be a party of protest, and very quickly people filtered towards them as a stronger unionist vote against what they saw was an injustice of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. So that's part of it, and a big part of it as well, I suppose. But the other part is that the party failed to modernize. The party, when it got to 2010, we're still looking at the Ulster Unionist Party from 1980 and thinking, we're still that strong unionist party. We didn't modernize in the way we did things. We didn't look to the youth that we need to look to have people coming up in a way that you need to refresh a party year on and year out. And we didn't look for more women to come into the party to refresh it. We just didn't modernize and look at how things are going to be in the future and what people want. And therefore, we ingrained a slide away from where we were. So even where we were on the right side and saying the right things, for example, on Brexit, when we were saying Brexit will be destabilizing, it's not a good thing, because we had slipped so far that we were ignored in many ways. When our MEP, Jim Nicholson, said, if you vote for Brexit, there will be border customs points in Larne and Belfast, he was laughed at. And look where we are. Or when Mike Nesbitt said in the Northern Ireland Affairs Committee, there will be border down the Irish Sea, he was ignored as well. So okay. we had basically slipped down that far.
Okay, if I could jump in at that point then, I mean, what you say is incredibly interesting and in a way, not unexpected. But that brings me on to another question. In a way, you say the explanation is compromise on the one hand, which was regarded as capitulation, and you're also saying failure to modernize, engage youth and other sectors of the electorate. In a way, you're saying failed to embrace a more liberalizing agenda. And you've referred to phraseology like union of people, and also the future lies in the people of Northern Ireland. Obviously, you're seeking to occupy new ground within the party, which sounds very unlike actually Trimble himself back in the pre-98 phase and going back to Molyneux and so on and so forth, which was a sort of more stalwart conservative posture, if you like. But my question really is then, my next question is there actually a sustainable unionist support for such a liberal platform in Northern Ireland? And therefore maybe your new approach is just going to entrench the problem that you've already experienced.
No, I think there is actually. I think there is a huge degree of socially liberal unionists and socially liberal loyalists throughout Northern Ireland. I think they're ripe for the picking. They want somebody to give them that direction. Look, I'm a unionist. People say a liberal unionist. I don't believe there's such a thing as a liberal unionist or a conservative unionist. You're either a unionist or you're not. I'm a unionist, but I have liberal views. And I think people really do want them. I think people are looking for that confident unionism away from that dogma of negativity and pessimism, which we have been facing for the last 15 or 16 years or even longer. So I think it is out there. I think there's a huge demographic who are wanting to grab this. I guess our problem is this, and it's the whole electoral problem that we have here in Northern Ireland, is that people are not voting for what they want. They are voting to keep the other side out. So people are voting for the DUP, not because the DUP have a big support base. They don't. They have a big voting base, and that is people vote for the DUP because they want to keep Sinn Féin out. And people are voting for Sinn Féin because they want to beat the DUP. And we've got into that sectarian politics, which came about because of the way we changed St Andrews. If you take that away, if we went back to the factory settings of 1998, if we suddenly said it was a joint first minister, not a first and deputy first minister, we elected them differently, then that takes that question away immediately. And then you will suddenly see that very socially liberal loyalism and unionism coming to the fore. And that's what we have to aim at.
Okay. If I could pick you up on another point which you already raised, which is say the Brexit question really. And I understand that obviously you opposed Brexit, as indeed did Northern Ireland, along with Scotland, which is an interesting configuration in and of itself. But we are where we are now, and I'd like to quote you on where we are now. You said, "I do not want a hardened border on the island of Ireland, but neither do I want a border in the Irish Sea." My question, therefore, is how can you maintain the integrity of the EU single market in the absence of any border whatsoever anywhere?
Well, listen, there's a couple of things to this, and we all know that the protocol, because of Brexit, can be extremely complicated, and we could spend all night talking about that.
Let's not do that.
Let's please not. No, you're right. But look, here's what I would say, Richard. Look, we have always had checks in the Irish Sea. There's always been checks of some description, certainly on livestock coming from Great Britain to Northern Ireland. So checks in the Irish Sea, and when we say the Irish Sea, we're talking Belfast, Larne, and you know, so that's always been there. But what hasn't been there is checks on goods which are coming from Great Britain to Northern Ireland, which are not going outside of Northern Ireland. And we've never had that, and we don't need to have that. So any goods coming from from Great Britain that are going to Northern Ireland and are not going on to the EU single market don't need to be checked. If goods are coming from Great Britain to Northern Ireland for onward transit to the EU single market, then they do need to be checked. And we proposed as far back as 2019 that there be legislation put in place to make it illegal for anybody to bring goods into Northern Ireland with an intent to take them into the EU when they're not designed to go into the EU. And that recommendation we made in 2019 finally appeared in the UK command paper in July 2021. So we think there's ways of having a virtual red lane and green lane for goods coming from Great Britain to Northern Ireland. The green lane, it's not leaving Northern Ireland. The red lane, it is leaving Northern Ireland to go into the EU, and it needs to be checked. And I think that's a simplistic way of looking at it, but it's absolutely doable. And business are saying this, Richard, if I can take up a little bit of time on this one. And business are saying this. They're saying, for example, Asda does not serve the European Union or Ireland in any shape or form, only the United Kingdom and Northern Ireland, 17 stores in Northern Ireland. And if you talk to the CEO of Asda in Northern Ireland, he'll tell you that when the goods leave the distribution centre in Great Britain, they know when it leaves. They know what truck it goes to. They know what boat the truck goes on to. They know what port the boat comes into. They know where the truck takes it, which store it takes to. They know what shelf it goes on. They know when it's taken off the shelf. They know when it's bought. They know when it leaves the store. Why does it need to be checked? It doesn't. It's controlled. And if you have issues, which are risk issues, such as, for an example, and it's been used a lot, orange black spot. But then you say to the EU, what's your issues? Well, we're worried about orange black spot getting into our food chain. Well, then you take that issue back to the UK government, you say, let's only buy oranges from a source within the EU. And there's that problem taken out. So, you know, there is solutions to this. All it takes is pragmatic, sensible voices in regards to it.
Yes, I suspect the European Union might prefer dealing with you than with France. But we're now at 25. So in the interest of time and moving things forward, I've many other questions and I'm very grateful for your answers, but I'm going to, in the interest of mixing things up a bit, hand over to my colleague, Niamh Gallagher. So thanks very much for talking.
No problem, Richard. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Doug. I'll try and do the same. And maybe, Richard, I'll even get back to you so you can ask some of those questions. Doug, really interesting to hear you talk about your very inclusive vision for Northern Ireland, which similarly to Richard seems to me to be, may I say, quite new. So I want to just pick on that a little bit and think about this issue of women in particular. Now, I browsed some of the party pages earlier on and just tallied up how many MLAs, councillors, MPs from each of the parties were indeed women. And as you probably know, the UUP falls well below any other party in Northern Ireland and significantly below the national average throughout the United Kingdom. So just a couple of stats for the listeners. Labour, for example, is 50% of MPs who are women. The Conservatives are at 24%. The UUP has 10% MLAs who are women, maybe 18% councillors and aldermen. So I know it's not quite apples for apples if we're talking about MPs versus MLAs, but still the point is there. My question, therefore, is why is the UUP seemingly so hostile to women in politics? Or why are women hostile to the party?
I think it's a fair point, and I think you've raised that very well, and you've made the point very well, and it's not something that's been lost on me. When I came in as the leader, and I've only been the leader 6 months, I have to say. So when I came in as the leader, I made it absolutely clear that I want to change the way we do business within the party to attract more females into the party and to platform them and to get them standing. The first thing I did was to bring in a young woman called Julianne Core, a loyalist from North Belfast who was a member of the PUP, and I brought her in and relatively new. I now have her standing for this next election, and I did similar with two other young women, both in Lagan Valley and in North Down. So I've literally have gone out there to try and change that. But the Ulster Unionist Party is your proverbial super tanker with a large turning circle. And only being in 6 months, it's going to take me a number of election cycles to be able to completely change that around. And of course, I need the electorate to elect women that I put up to stand. So, you know, I do have around 10 women standing in the next election, not exact, but around that as well. And I need them to be elected so I can change those stats and look for more. I mean, I'm sitting in Upper Bann here at the minute, and in Upper Bann we have, I think it's 10 councillors, and of those 10 councillors, 3 are very strong, articulate women, and that's the sort of thing that I want to do and I want to promote, and I am doing that. And indeed, I'm using positive discrimination to be able to do that. But you raise a really good issue. If the women aren't coming forward, then I have a problem. So I have to change the attitude of the party, and that's a turning circle, which is just going to take me more than one election cycle.
Yep, thank you very much. Drawing on this, but on something you said earlier on, you talked about unionism, and you said you're either one or you're not. But I want to push you a bit on that. And for our audience, who'll comprise lots of different people whose knowledge of unionism is mixed, what does unionism in Northern Ireland mean to you? And are there party or electoral differences on this issue?
Well, unionism, I'm a unionist in its widest sense. That is, I believe in the union of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. That is 4 different nations, England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. And that is union of the 4 nations coming together, each very distinct, but each the same. And my unionism here in Northern Ireland should be very similar to unionism in Scotland, unionism in Wales, and unionism in England. And within Northern Ireland, my unionism is really a unionism of people who are like-minded with me, like a marriage, where they may not necessarily completely agree with what I want, but we can still be together on certain very strong issues. And there's a degree of unionism there. So for me, it's a togetherness is the easy way to put that. It's the same feeling that if you are Irish living in Ireland, in the Republic of Ireland, it's the same union that you feel when you are part of the European Union. You know, it's that same sense that you would get when you're there. It's the same sense when you're part of the United States, which is a United States. It's states coming together in a union. So that's what my union is all about. And in order to do that, what I have to do is to make sure that I can reach out to all of the people and say, there's something in this for you, whether you're liberal or whether you're conservative in your outlook, whether you're religious or not religious, whether you're from the LGBT community or whether you're not. There needs to be something in this for you. It won't all be there. We all have to give and we all have to take. But it's that sense of wanting to share, which I think is ingrained in my unionism, and it's something that I've learned from traveling the world, and some of the experiences I've had in traveling the world absolutely shaped me. And I don't want to take up time, so I won't go into some of the stories, but some of those things have really shaped me in the way I think that I can bring people together, and I think that's what's important, bringing people together.
Okay, great, thank you. I like how you mentioned the other constituent nations of the UK, but I want to push you a little bit on this. Because it does seem to me that even though you're saying we're all the same, there is still a highly selective quality to aspects of unionism in Northern Ireland. So, for example, there is a link, of course, between unionism and Britishness, as you, I'm sure, would agree with. And there are aspects of Britishness that Northern Irish Unionists are very keen to identify with, such as love for the monarchy, flags, like in your background, and symbols, for example. But at the same time, there seems to be quite a selective attitude towards legislation passed elsewhere in the UK, which many people in Great Britain would identify as being central to a certain conception of Britishness. And I'm thinking mainly about liberal legislation here, whether it's around issues around abortion or sexual minorities, for instance. So they might find aspects of the unionism articulated in Northern Ireland to be profoundly un-British in a way. I was wondering what your views are on that. I'll stop there.
Yeah, and I think it's a fascinating question, actually, and we could maybe talk about this one all night as well, because I think you're absolutely right. There is a form of unionism in Northern Ireland, actually, which is more akin to Ulster nationalism, very, very inward-looking, very ourselves, and we will make our own way in the world, and we don't need anybody else. That's not unionism. That's the absolute opposite of unionism. Unionism is where you look and you take and you give to all of the people. So, I mean, I've been an avid supporter of same-sex marriage, for an example, you know, and making sure that we have rights for the LGBT community. I think that's incredibly important, and likewise I have been a supporter of women's bodily rights, and therefore I support abortion reform as a unionist, and I think that's the sort of things that we need. And there are certain rights that people have in England, Scotland and Wales that we should have here in Northern Ireland, and we need to fix that. And as part of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement in 1998, there was a move to make sure that we had a Northern Ireland Bill of Rights. We're back on that trail again to create that Northern Ireland Bill of Rights. But there's so much that happens in England, Scotland and Wales that I think we should have here today. Just today, for example, we had a debate on banning hunting with dogs. Something they've done in England, Scotland and Wales, I think, for the last 20 years, but not here in Northern Ireland. We still have hunting with dogs. And the Democratic Unionist Party voted against it, whereas my party voted in favour of banning hunting with dogs. You know, so there is a degree of that Ulster nationalism pretty much there within that.
Yeah, great. So maybe, I mean, it does seem to me like there is flexibility within unionism, and you are articulating a different version of unionism to some of the other parties in Northern Ireland. And well, anyway, I'll leave this one with you. I wonder how useful it will be to talk about that in the future. But speaking of which, you mentioned the Good Friday Agreement, the Belfast Agreement, and you said it might need an MOT, which is a good way to put it. So rather than telling you the problems I see with the Good Friday Agreement, or my, well, intellectual problems perhaps, if you had a clean slate, how would you amend the Good Friday Agreement, the Belfast Agreement?
Well, interesting. I think we had to do this in 1998 to stop us killing each other, and therefore it had a very real reason. Let's stop us killing each other. Let's give us a pathway for the future. And I've always thought that we should have done a Belfast Agreement 2 and a Belfast Agreement 3 and a Belfast Agreement 4. Every 10 years we should be updating the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. We haven't done so. I'm suggesting, and I have suggested to the Secretary of State, that we should be looking at doing this MOT when we get to 25 years of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. The thing I have to say is we have to do power sharing. You know, division is still here. It's got a bit worse because of the protocol, but division is still here. So power sharing is really important, you know, to be able to share power with our nationalist neighbours, and likewise them to share with their unionist neighbours. So power sharing is really, really important. However, it's easier to look at the problem and say, how do we fix the problem? And the problem that we've got now is that we have 5 parties that go into an executive. They go into an executive without even agreeing a programme for government, and then they try to govern Northern Ireland. And they all sit in their silos doing their own thing. And they all say, look, we don't want to be in silos. Let's do an outcomes-based programme for government. But when the chips are down, they all sit in their silos, and that's not creating good government. What we really need to do is to be able to have a government we can say, you're not working, we're going to vote you out, and here's what we're going to put in your place. And that's why I say that you need to have a government of 2 or 3 parties, which is the government, power sharing government, and an opposition of 2 or 3 parties, which are in opposition, which hold them to account. Because an opposition is not just an opposition for the sake of being an opposition. It just makes sure that we have good government and scrutinise good government. So that could be a way forward as a model to move forward. But certainly we have to do something, because what's not working right now is 5 parties all in silos, all doing their own thing. And if you don't believe me, you just have to look at what we have passed as legislation in the last 10 years. It's been pretty pitiful.
Okay, thank you, Doug. Again, I've lots of questions, but I'm going to pass over to Barry, who I think wants to go to the floor. So we'll do that first of all, and hopefully get a chance to return later. Thanks, Doug.
Okay. Thanks a million all. I should also say, of course, many of you would have seen our own Niamh Gallagher this afternoon speaking on BBC Newsline. The clip has gone viral, I believe. Okay, Doug, I have many questions on the floor. We're not going to get to all of them, so I want to go through at a fairly rapid pace, if I may. I've put questions into 3 groups because I'd like to go back as well to Niamh and to Richard to just kind of give a response at the very end. So predictably, questions are present, past and future, and in that order. 2 questions I'm going to tie together, and to be honest with you, I just want to put them to you because this is what people have asked, right? You spoke about it in your intervention. Martin MacDonald has asked, as a pragmatic and responsible political party, why has the UUP joined in the opposition to the Northern Ireland Protocol when 90% of businesses are of the view that the EU's proposals to reduce the checks on goods entering Northern Ireland are very close to addressing those concerns? Just to let you know that was asked. And then very relatedly, an anonymous questioner actually said, Steve Aiken, former leader, is one of the group, including DUP, TUV, opposing the protocol. You joined a platform with other parties and ex-terrorists, Billy Hutchinson, against the protocol. Where do you really stand? So there is 2 from a bunch of similar questions. You may not have anything further to add to that, Doug, but if you do, please do. I'm going to tag on 2 short questions, okay? The first is from Des Atkinson. Des is at the University of Exeter, and Des asks, given that the communities in Northern Ireland share power, would things be so very different if that same structure were implemented as part of a reunited Ireland? And I know this is quite a lot, right? But also a question from Hugo McNeil. I'll recap in a second. Hugo says, thanks, Doug, for a positive and constructive presentation. We've seen the continuing rise of English and Scottish and even elements of Welsh nationalism. Against this background, how do you think Northern Unionism can strengthen its profile within the UK? So just to recap, anything more on the protocol? Anything about kind of being able to transplant the current arrangements from Des Atkinson, re-implementing the structure in Northern Ireland in a reunited Ireland? And then this question from Hugo about how Northern Unionism can strengthen its profile within the UK.
Okay, so it's really important for people to understand this protocol question. The protocol is not a good deal. The whole point about the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, it created a fine balance. It created a fine balance between nationalists and unionism, and it was extraordinary in the way it did it. Nobody was a winner and nobody was a loser. What the protocol has done, it is unbalanced. It is unbalanced that. If you were to say to me, I'm going to stick a border on the island of Ireland, I'm telling you now as a unionist, I will say that's a bad idea. And my nationalist neighbours would not like that. And I would be standing with them to say, I don't want you to be put through that. I would not support that. But how people think that putting a border down the Irish Sea to separate Northern Ireland from the rest of the United Kingdom is not going to upset unionists is totally beyond me. I'm lost that people think that would not annoy us. Of course it does. It has undone that very fine balance. So and as far back as 2019, we have put forward proposals to try and deal with that very issue. In 2019, in 2020, and in 2021, we have put forward proposals. But here's the fundamental problem. Northern Ireland politicians are not in the room to make the decisions. We're not sitting there saying, if you choose to do that, this is the outcome you're going to have. If we weren't involved in 1998 Belfast Good Friday Agreement, it would never have happened. So we needed to be in the room, and we've never been in the room. And there's a problem here. And there's a democratic deficit with the protocol as well. And that means that people in Europe, MEPs in Europe, can make rules about Northern Ireland that I, as an elected representative, have absolutely no say over. If you're in the United States right now, you just went to war over that. No taxation without representation. All I'm saying is, we would need a deal, and we understand there has to be some sort of an agreement between the UK and the EU over Northern Ireland. We accept that, but the one we have now is just not good enough. And we think there are solutions out there to fix it, and we're aiming and trying to fix it. But don't peg us as a party that will threaten to bring down Stormont, because we certainly will not do. And for those who are saying Doug Beattie was standing beside a terrorist, you're absolutely right. The Belfast Good Friday Agreement released people like him. I also stand beside a political leader who says that the IRA's violence was justified, and I stand beside her as well. So these things are things we have to do because we agreed these at the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. We said we are going to try and work together. So we do work together. So we can't have people being exceptionalist here and saying you can't stand with this chap, but it's okay to stand with that other fella. It doesn't work that way. How does unionism, I think this is, Barry, the question, and I might have lost the other one, but the question about how does unionism stack up against the rise of nationalism that we're seeing there? It's a real problem for us because there is a rise of nationalism, particularly in England, I would suggest, which is a real problem for us. But all we can do is exhort the benefits of the union, the benefits of being united together, being positive, being optimistic, be forward-looking, and we can keep doing that, and not just within our own shores, but beyond our own shores. So all we can do is counter those messages by putting forward our own message. Look, we are a small part of the United Kingdom, 1.8 million people, and unionism within that is even smaller yet again. So we can only do what we do. But as the leader of a political party, I will not stop advocating for a union, and I will do that in the most positive way that I possibly can. There was one more question, Barry, and I can't.
Yeah, I'll come back to that. Actually, I realised I put a lot to you, Des, and you've managed, Doug, excuse me, and you've managed very well. The question was from Des, sorry, from Des Atkinson. The just specifically on that last bit, right? Specifically the rise of Scottish nationalism. Can you just comment the extent to which that's a destabilising or like a stabilising impact on Ulster Unionism in your view?
Well, listen, I tell you what it does do. It focuses the mind. It makes people say, look, we can't sit back on our laurels here. We can't just sort of take all of these things for granted. If we want to get people to want to stay within the United Kingdom, to be part of this union, we have to work at it. We have to do better things. And you can all look at the present Westminster government, and I would look at that present Westminster government under Boris Johnson, and I would find that not something that I would want to remain under for any length of time, but he won't be there forever. We will move forward. The United Kingdom has always gone through ebbs and flows, but the issue of Scottish nationalism and the rise of Scottish nationalism just tells me as a unionist that I have to do more and do it better, to say to people, look at this place that we live in, look at the opportunities that we have, the 5th largest economy in the world. Even if that was to slip to 6th, it's still right up there. We have a standard of living which is far better than many others. So there's many positives of the union, but we can't just sit back on our laurels. So Scottish nationalism has focused the mind.
Thanks, Doug. And now I'll go back to Des Atkinson's question, which is what I tripped over a second ago. And I also want to attach a quick question from John Cushnahan. So Des's question asked Des at the University of Exeter, given that the communities in Northern Ireland share power, would things be so very different if that same structure were implemented as part of a reunited Ireland? And similarly, John Cushnahan, whom I'm sure you know, former Alliance Party leader and former Fine Gael MEP, asks, what is your attitude to the shared island initiative of the Irish government?
Yeah, listen, look, I'm a unionist, and people have put it to me all the time about a united Ireland and my thoughts on that. Look, it's been set out that we will choose our own destiny in the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, and if we were ever to go and have a border poll, and that border poll was to say we are to unite, then that's what we do. That's what democracy is. But I don't think it will. But as a unionist, I said this earlier on, that I genuinely believe in this union, that I feel at home in this union, that everywhere I go, I feel that I bring my Irishness with me, but I'm still very much at home anywhere else in the United Kingdom. So it's not something I want. It's not something I'm striving for. I'm striving for the absolute opposite. But will it be the same if it was a united Ireland? I've got no idea. That's for other people to sell the virtues of that. It's not up for me as a unionist to describe the architecture that anybody would want around a united Ireland. And sorry, the last one, Barry, the last question. It
was a kind of a specific one from John Cushnahan about the Irish Governments United.
Sorry. Yeah, well, it's interesting. I'm going to say this. Here's me going to be really honest with you. I remember meeting the Taoiseach and talking about this and saying to him, Micheál, and I like Micheál Martin, I have to say, but I remember saying to him, you have to understand that for Unionists who are very suspicious of any initiative, they're always worried that somebody is trying to shovel them into a United Ireland by creating something, through the back door. And therefore it's difficult for Unionists just to engage at this moment in time. But having spoken to the Taoiseach, I don't get that sense of that's what he's after. I get that sense of what he's trying to do is just create something that we all share and would work for us all on this island, where people can come together, but geographically we can stay as we are. So I think I think it's a good initiative. I think it's something that we're looking at, but just right now there's a suspicion that we just need to overcome that suspicion.
It's very forthright. Doug, I want to give you one question from the floor again, then I want to go to Professor Biagini, who has a question for you. So we reflected a little bit on the present. Obviously, we're talking about the island of Ireland, so we have to look to the past. And Fergal McCarthy asks, can I ask Doug what his views are on the use of official state apologies and acts of remorse within international relations, and specifically the British-Irish context, in an effort to aid community healing and cross-community relations? Example, Tony Blair's apology for the famine, David Cameron's apology for the events of Bloody Sunday, President Higgins' pause at the memorial of Lord Mountbatten.
I think that they are things that need to be used more. We did say a number of years ago that wouldn't it be great if all of the political parties here in Northern Ireland gave out impact statements and just made impact statements about how we got to where we are. So as Unionists, we could look back at the 50 odd years that we were in charge and say, were we honest? Were we fair brokers? Did we really give our neighbours the best shout possible? Did we really, were we really a good place, or were we a cold house for Catholics and nationalists, and make an impact statement in regards to that? And I think that would have been a fair impact statement to make. But others need to make the same impact statement. So, everybody who supported terrorism and the murder of our citizens, regardless of who they are, needs to make an impact statement to say that that was not just. The murder of our people by paramilitaries, by terrorists, be they Catholic, be they Protestant, be that the reason why they were murdered or any other reason, it was not justified. We could have got to where we are today without a single murder. We could have got here. We would have been able to get here by talking to each other and negotiating with each other. So there would need to be an impact statement in regards to that. And others could do similar as well. We all are at fault here. We're all at fault, some in one way, some in another way. So I think impact statements and apologies, if that's what they're needed, if that's what they are, but people maybe don't want to apologize, but an impact statement might be something that would be worthwhile, I think would be useful to help us move forward.
Doug, before I pass you over to Professor Biagini, are you speaking in a very general sense there, just about, sorry for, the conflict in its kind of general form, or are you saying impact statements regarding different incidents and different people and different?
No, I think impact statements, which look, I'm going to focus on terrorism, but an impact statement which says, listen, guys, murdering people in their beds, blowing people up in or murdering people in their churches, or detonating a bomb in a town centre was wrong. It did not progress anything here on this island. That's an impact statement. In the same way that Unionism, who were in charge of Northern Ireland, could say discrimination against nationalists and Catholics was wrong. We should not have done that. We were a cold house for nationalists and Catholics in Northern Ireland. That kind of an impact statement.
Cool. Thanks, Doug. Professor Biagini.
And thank you, Doug. I've been greatly encouraged by what you said about your views about the Ulster Unionist Party and where it should be going. I also found very interesting what you had to say about both Brexit and indeed the way in which you feel marginalized by the decision-making process in the European Union. Now, however, of course, this all raises another issue, and that is about the way in which Northern Ireland has been marginalized within the United Kingdom by the decision-making process, especially around Brexit and since, in which, of course, Northern Irish voices were not heard, were ignored, as you said, more than once. does this not create a taxation without representation issue for Northern Ireland? Is it not a major question of constitutional reform for the United Kingdom if the United Kingdom is to stay together, quite apart from the Irish question and the future of the island of Ireland? And what would you propose for the United Kingdom to survive into the current century and to see the end of it as a United Kingdom rather than an English Union?
Well, that's a massive question, if I'm honest, because it stretches all the way back to before Brexit took place, and when the question came up about Brexit, and when the question about should we leave the European Union or should we stay was first put out there to everybody, I think we should have all scrutinised that question a little bit more, to say, well, how long? If two constituent parts of the United Kingdom say no, then there must be some other way to deal with that particular problem. So that goes all the way back to before Brexit, and we were clear Brexit would be destabilizing, and Brexit was destabilizing, and it is still destabilizing now. And then we got to the stage where Boris Johnson literally wanted just to get a deal across the table, and that's what he did. And I remember when it was first muted, the protocol, 2nd of October 2019, and we were screaming from the rafters. I think we put out 34 press releases between the 2nd of October and the 17th of October to say, don't do the protocol, it will not work. And on the 17th of October 2019, the protocol was actually physically born. And within that, there was a clear view that Northern Ireland politicians were not going to have a say. And the UK government did this, and I can't understand why they did this. And they tried to hide it by saying, well, we'll have a vote every 4 years in the Northern Ireland Assembly to see if you'll want Articles 5 to 10 of the protocol to continue every 4 years. And that in itself has created more destabilization. So if you're a foreign direct investor wanting to come to Northern Ireland because you get the best of both worlds, and somebody says to you, but only for 4 years until they vote on it, and it might change. You know, so we were sitting there saying you should never have done that either in the first place. So the whole problem was that Northern Ireland politicians were not involved in designing this. And the European Union, and it's okay saying this is a UK fault, and it is a UK's fault, and they have marginalised us in this. But the European Union have grasped this. And every time I speak to the European Union, I say, this is damaging Northern Ireland. So they know it's damaging Northern Ireland. But they keep responding me by saying, yes, but the UK government agreed it. And I remember speaking to the EU ambassador to London, and I said to him, the protocol is damaging the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. And his answer was, yes, it is, but not as much as Brexit. But both things are the same. It's still damaging the very fabric of what's keeping peace here in Northern Ireland. And I still do not have a say in the architecture of it. So I have been sidelined by the UK government, but I've also been sidelined by the EU, who knows that I'm not having a say within this. And I'm not sure how you get around this unless we bring Northern Ireland politicians into the room and say, this is what we're proposing. Will it work? Yes, no, we know best, but we've not been brought in. So there is a degree of being marginalised and not being able to have a say. And of course, the UK government is our government, so it sits with them. It's their fault. But others know the problem, and there's no point compounding that problem if you know what the problem is.
Thanks very much, Doug. I'm going to put one more question to you, if that's all right, in the time we have, and then I'm going to go back to both Niamh and Richard to see if they want to comment on anything that's been said or have any follow-ups. So I'm going to be very brief. This question came in 3 or 4 different forms, Doug, and it's a predictable one. James Gallagher asks Doug, if UP becomes the second largest party in the executive, will he work alongside a Sinn Féin First Minister? A similar question was put by Charles J. If majority supports a Sinn Féin First Minister, will Doug Beattie honour the vote to the majority? What do you think?
Well, listen, I've answered this question an awful lot, and it's a pure politics question. It's pure politics because we're heading into an election, and I do not know of any of the leaders of a political party, and you can go to any political party leader that you want here in Northern Ireland and ask them to say, what will you do when you lose? What will you do when you come second? Who's going to do that? Who's going to talk about leading your team onto the pitch? And then the first thing you say to your team on the pitch, okay, guys, when you lose, this is what we're going to do. We don't do it. That's pure politics. I'm leading to be the First Minister. And that's the only thing that I will look at. But I want to add something to this, because that answer is being framed by some people as me saying I won't work with Sinn Féin. So let me just be absolutely clear. We work with Sinn Féin in the executive. We work with Sinn Féin in the assembly. We work with Sinn Féin in the assembly committees. We work with Sinn Féin in local government, in councils. We work with Sinn Féin in council groups. We work with Sinn Féin in council committees. We work in all party groups with Sinn Féin. I meet them all the time. We work with Sinn Féin every single day. So if anybody's trying to say we don't want to work with Sinn Féin, they're wrong. I'm simply saying is, when the election's done, I believe we need to look at what the programme for government is going to be. And depending on what the programme for government is going to be, I will decide whether or not we in the Ulster Unionist Party will go into government or whether we will go into opposition. That will be based on a programme for government, not on whether Sinn Féin is the top party or not.
Thanks, me, Doug. There's many more questions. I also would love to hear how you got on in the States, but we don't have time. Doug,
I know.
Literally a minute each, please, if you wouldn't mind. Niamh, and then Richard, and then back to Doug. A minute to two.
Gosh, no time at all. Okay, thank you very much, Barry, and thank you, Doug. 1 minute, here I go. So I wanted to say thank you very much for your candor, Doug. It's been a really interesting discussion, and I really appreciate your time. You've outlined a very inclusive vision for Northern Ireland, which I find quite striking, particularly with regards to your views on sexual minorities, making Northern Ireland work socially and economically, women's political representation, rights over their own bodies, and also your idea, I think, of an impact statement. I know it's difficult to speak as a leader of a party and to talk about the party in the past. So I find that very, very moving in a way. But I imagine, as you said yourself, the party is also constrained by realities. And effectively, will your voters support what you are outlining? It seems to me that you are probably thinking of getting votes from different constituencies here, one more alliance leading voters who are open to the liberal ideas that you're mentioning, but also perhaps DUP voters as well, who are going to be much more conservative by and large. So that's an interesting challenge, I think, for the party. But I want to say thank you very much again, and it's a pleasure to speak to you today, and I'll hand now over to Richard. Thanks, Doug.
Well, I think we're very much on the same page. I'd also like to thank you for really very measured and reflective comments and your engagement with all sides, including also your call for an impact statement from Sinn Féin, plotting an alternative course from the past to here. I also do share Niamh's worry in the face of everything that you've said about the electoral traction that you may have with your platform. In response to my opening question, as I read your answers, on the one hand, you said the problem post-Trimble was that we compromised, that we went against the grain, but also you said, but we failed to compromise. That's to say, we failed to sufficiently intensify the sort of liberal agenda. So I see a potential conflict there, and well, the best of luck with it.
And if I can, Barry, just come back, and I think it's important to put something out here, is that, you know, it is important to look at all the demographics here in Northern Ireland, small n nationalists or alliance voters. But here's an interesting stat, is that 2/3 of all non-voters are unionists. 2/3 of all non-voters are unionists, and they're not voting because they don't have a vision. So what I'm trying to do is give them a vision, give them a reason to get out, get them a reason to get out of bed, get them to a polling station, get them to vote for a unionist party. And you can only do that if you're confident, if you're positive, if you're optimistic, and you're inclusive. And that's what I'm attempting to do.
Perfect point on which to end, Doug. Thank you very much. I'll just, without repeating it, I'll echo my colleagues. Thank you for your candor and for your time. It's been really most interesting and most enlightening to hear from you. That's our last meeting of 2021. Thank you to everyone who's been in attendance. We have an exciting panel or slate of speakers lined up for the new year. A couple of speakers we're still trying to find dates for, but just to give a sense, we do have our first meeting pinned down with RTE's Tony Connolly on the 17th of January. Thank you, Tony, for being with us. And then over the course of what are going to be fortnightly meetings, we're going to hear from Lisa Dwan, dancer, actor and director, our own John Cushnan, who is in the crowd this evening. John Cushnan, former leader of the Alliance Party, former Fine Gael MEP. And I'm also very excited to be in the throes of organising an event with colleagues at Boston College, I've mentioned a couple of times, which will be at the end of February on the Irish-American angle. Perhaps we can invite Doug back to contribute on that matter as well, given your recent trip there. There are other speakers as well lined up. I can't quite pin them down yet, so the fact there isn't a date attached, we won't mention them. We're still trying to reschedule Jeffrey Donaldson, DUP, as well, and Julian Smith, MP. So please keep an eye on the website if you're interested, as was posted recently in the chat. If you want to hear more about the events, please send an email to bc348@cam.ac.uk. Thank you all, and to my fellow panelists, I wish you all a very happy rest of 2021 and a restful break over Christmas. Thank you all for your time. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Doug. Bye. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.